Well, it's good to be back with you. My name is Jeff Fuller, J Fuller Interviews, J Fuller Interviews on Instagram, the Facebook group, Twitter, and on YouTube. You can certainly subscribe on YouTube to J Fuller Interviews and presenting people's stories because their stories will make our stories much better, more impactful, and less ignorant. So let's listen up and learn something as we talk to Jill Campbell today. Jill, great to have you.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I was reading on your website somewhere that you had an early start with Morgan Freeman. Can you just share that story?
Yeah. So I went to Ithaca College and I got a BFA in drama and I studied theater and graduated, moved to New York City, like most aspiring entertainers. And one of my first jobs was at the Public Theater in New York City. Joseph Papp's Public Theater, and I got a job as a production assistant on Taming of the Shrew in Shakespeare in the Park, and Morgan Freeman was starring in it with Helen Hunt and Tracy Ullman. And Morgan Freeman and I got along really great, and I was tasked with like helping him with his lines every day, and he always requested that I helped him, and he was just a real gentleman. And I think I remember he wanted to go to one of the Jewish delis on the Lower East Side, and it was super fun because we went down there and just walking in with him and watching people recognize him, and it was a great like first experience in the business. And
What year was that?
It might have been like 1990.
Okay.
89 or 90. You could Google it. Like, when did
Sure.
Morgan Freeman star in Taming of the Shrew with Tracy Ullman? But like, I wish, and what was great too is like at the end of the production, he was a really good photographer, and he took photos of everyone on the crew and cast, and he framed them, and he gave us each a copy of our photos he took, and I have it to this day. I love it. And I really wish we had email back then.
Yeah.
Or like social media, because I would have kept in touch. But it was like back then, you just kind of,
right.
You lost touch with a lot of people. Social media is great for business.
Oh, I agree with that. Jill, what led you to Ithaca?
I was a theater major. I originally studied acting, and they had a really good program. So, and then that's also where I started film as well, because they had a great film program, and I found myself like almost more drawn to the film students, and I ended up like acting in a lot of film students' films, and hung out more with the film people than the theater. I hung out with the theater people, but I really loved the film people as well.
So when was your first acting gig or school play? Was that something you started early on, or was that something that you always had an interest later on?
I started that really early on. I started it in high school. I went to there was like a BOCES performing arts program in high school. So my last 2 years, I went half day to high school and half day to this performing arts high school, which was also super cool. It was run by this man named Burt Michaels, and he was like one of the original Jets in West Side Story in the original movie.
Yeah.
And he really instilled like a really realistic work ethic on what it takes to make it in the entertainment business. So, and then I went to Ithaca and I studied theater, and I started in a play called Getting Out there. I did some children's theater before that, a lot of like community theater. And then when I moved back to New York, I was in a couple of off Broadway plays, and then I started writing, and I just kind of realized I really wanted to be in the other side. Like I wanted to be in the producing, directing side, which is when I got the job at the Public Theater.
Yeah. Who cultivated that interest when you were younger?
My parents really did. I mean, it's an interesting question because, I grew up on Long Island in kind of like just a kind of a boring suburb, but my parents always brought me to Broadway and to the theater. And my mother like loved to sing show tunes around the house. And my grandmother did. And, high school when you're a teenager can be troubling times and intense times. And theater was like definitely my like way out and was like my salvation. I really love theater. Like I liked art, the process of art.
Yeah, I was speaking with somebody on this podcast, and they mentioned that they had an art gallery, and then with COVID, where they couldn't get their art out, they started a podcast just to tell the stories about their art, which I thought was fascinating. And where I came across you, I'm a big basketball fan. A lot of people know that about me. But behind me is the Mr. Chibbs, a Kenny Anderson story that you can find on Amazon Prime. As I was researching that, I found that you have a connection to this. How did you first find out about Kenny Anderson and his story?
Okay, so I directed, produced, and directed, produced, and wrote this film. So because I grew up on Long Island, my brother was a big basketball player. My father was a big basketball fan. Like he brought me to games. I was like a little basketball brat. I was like just brought to games from like early on. And like when the Nets played at Nassau Stadium, I would be like getting autographs. I think I remember I got like Jules Irving's autograph early on. And like, so like I knew and basketball has been my favorite sport. So I knew the whole scene, and I met these producers that I was working with. I was doing some writing scripts for them, and they were like really interested in getting into docs and into sports docs. So we kept trying to figure out things to do together. And one day they texted me. They're like, "What about Kenny Anderson?" And I'm like, "Yeah, hell yes, definitely." And then we got in touch with Kenny, and Kenny grilled me because he's like, "Who are you?" And wasn't just going to give his story to anyone. And so we decided to meet. And then weirdly, when Kenny and I met, we I don't know, we just really bonded and hit it off. And maybe and we've talked about this, but I came from some trauma in my own background. And I understood his issues with alcohol and sorry, I don't know why I'm just getting you. find your picture. Someone's calling me in the middle of this. So I understood his, like I really got his story, just being a New Yorker and like understanding like being around a functioning alcoholic and also being around somebody who's very successful, who I mean, he had a great career. I think people beat him up a lot because like what he accomplished is completely incredible. And then he got really beat up too, but he had a lot of demons he was dealing with. Right. So I wanted to, as like a documentarian who, I studied it. I have my master's in it. I've been working in this industry since 2006. Like I didn't want to do a typical sports doc. I didn't want to do like, show Kenny playing and then tell his story that way. I really wanted to meet him where he was at now, because I thought it was fascinating because he was in a midlife crisis. So I just started filming him from when I met him and like started watching how the story would unravel from there.
So with Kenny, did he have many, I guess, objections or concerns? Did he say that I don't want that in and then come back and say, no, put that in the documentary? What was that dialogue like between you?
I mean, the thing with documentary is you really have to build trust with your subject and really get to know them and form a relationship. But you're also creating a work of art, and you're creating like a story with a beginning, middle, and end. And you have to be objective as well. So Kenny and I like would discuss everything. And I there was a quote from Albert Maysles that I read once where he like always said that what he does, because it's a big dilemma that documentarians go through. Like, how much of someone's story do you tell? Do you ruin someone's life if you can? Do you what do you do? And, from the start, I told Kenny, like, we'd watch, I'd make the film that I want to make, and I'd show it to him before, moving forward. And if he had any major objections, we could battle it out. Like I could tell him why needs to be in there for the plot. But like in the end, if he really hated it and didn't want it to be in there, I would find a way to not put it in there and find something else, because I feel like this person is lending their life to you and they have to trust you. And there's ways tell the story without like putting, there's definitely things I did not put in the film. Maybe I should have. And it is funny because when Kenny and Natasha were like nervous too, because, he wanted to get a coaching job and they didn't want me to ruin his, I was telling his story as truthfully as I could, but he's also living in, he's a young guy and he's has a life. So they were nervous about that, but we had a special screening for them and they ended up loving it, crying. Kenny was like, "Oh, you should have even made it more raw." Like after he gave me so much, crap to say, like the whole time, like he was up and down, and that's, it's really hard to sit in front of a camera and tell your life story. But then he saw it and he loved it, and it was it took us 4 years to get it made. It was a really hard process. I mean, the first producers pulled out. I had the footage for like a year. Nobody was doing anything. We were trying to raise funds. The NBA footage was really expensive. We couldn't afford a lot of it, which actually, when you have an obstacle like that as an artist, it's actually really good because it makes you create something different. It makes you like look out of the box. And I feel like in the end, we showed enough and that people can watch the film and then go Google some more of his great moves afterwards. So I feel like we put in, and that's also why, like, I was really specific in the editor I chose, because I felt like I'm really good with the life story and getting into the nuances, but I really wanted an editor that understood basketball. I didn't want to miss out on something. I didn't want to mess anything up. So Paul Lovelace, who edited the film, we had a lot of conversations about it, and he was a big Kenny Anderson fan, as well as our DP, Nelson Walker. So that was awesome. Like Nelson, you would just look at him filming and he would have the biggest smile on his face the whole time. And Kenny loved those guys too. So
yeah, for me, being a big basketball fan, I knew of Kenny Anderson just from his playing days here, playing against Bobby Hurley, the movie put on, and people can YouTube that for free. So it's kind of interesting how it forces you to share the story in a different way, but I believe in a more meaningful way. A mutual friend is Ian Cunningham, who does a Kenny Anderson showcase, and he introduced me to Kenny. Long story short, I knew Kenny the basketball player until I watched the Mr. Chibbs Kenny Anderson story on Amazon Prime. When you were diving into his story, did anything not shock you, but surprise you of a kid from New York City, what he had to overcome, and also not being surprised that when you come into money or make the NBA, you're going to have choices, and sometimes you make poor choices. Was there anything in his story that really surprised you or shocked you?
I mean, I thought he really, it wasn't a surprise, but, he has 8 kids and he cares deeply about each kid, but he was honest. He wasn't always the best dad. And part of that was he was in the NBA. He was living the high life. And again, like he's from my time, like in the 90s, again, like we didn't have social media. The email wasn't as easy to stay in touch with each kid or person. So he, I mean, I knew about his horrible sexual abuse issue because that had, that was posted online. But I think what surprised me was like how real and honest. He's a good guy.
Yeah.
I mean, he's become like a very close friend. He'll call me like weekly to check in. I mean, look, we all have faults. Nobody's perfect. And he was really willing to like dig deep into his soul and share that journey with us. And that surprised me, but that like the way I work and the art I make, I really like to go deep. So he really, there are times in that film where it's like, he's deep, when he's talking about thinking about suicide in the car or like, and what was your other question? Sorry, it was a good question.
Well, it's just as far as his background, how you pulled that out, or if you're shocked by anything that he had to say or stories that you did not know about, but that you pulled out within the documentary.
I mean, it was really interesting how he has no filter. Like we were, it's in the documentary, and that this is one of the scenes where like, do we use this or not? But he's like doing a clinic with a bunch of kids, like 8 to 14, and then he starts getting emotional and talking about how he was raised, and he loves his mother. His mother was awesome. His mother had a rough life, was in an abusive relationship, and then he talks about how, like, his mother was raped in front of him, and it's in front of kids, right? So, as a documentarian, you keep the camera rolling, and then you decide after that, do we put the scene in or not? But we felt like the kids were like crying, and the little boy that went up to Kenny afterwards, who was like, he really moved Kenny. Like, Kenny being that honest is the way that he's going to help anyone who's having an issue. And like, if he could help one kid by sharing truth about his story.
Right.
So I guess that was like the best. It was that he was just so honest.
Now I want you to reflect about yourself a little bit, and you say it just came out because Kenny is just open and honest, but I do believe that it says a lot about yourself, how you pull that out of people, whether it's Kenny or other projects you've worked on. How do you build that trust? I mean, with some people it is natural, personalities click, it's awesome, but sometimes you just have to work that in. How do you build that trust to pull that out, whether it's Kenny Anderson or someone else?
I mean, I think that you have to really listen to people. You have to be really there and willing to, you can't, it's not about ego. It's about telling a story to share someone's story, to help understand the world better, to help understand a person better. I mean, with Kenny, how I built that trust was I just relayed personal stories to him. Like, as he was telling me these stories, I told him some stories. So it was like, he's not just talking to me, I'm talking to him as well.
Right.
And I think that's how we built it. And also that, like, I wasn't there to, like, I think he was really happy that I wasn't a fanboy. Like, if I was a fanboy making this film, it would be a very different film. It would just be Kenny's greatest moments and the typical, like, let's watch his life. And that would be a good film too. I would have needed like $2 million to make it, to, pay for NBA footage. But I felt like this was like really about, like, we told his life. We have plenty of NBA footage. We showed, we did get the Bobby Hurley move. We got we paid for the important moments, but the footage in there connects to who he was and what he was going through at the moment. And like, he really was going through a midlife crisis, and I caught that. So.
And following the documentary, Kenny had a stroke. I had the privilege of interviewing, as I mentioned him before, and he just shared about that. But were you shocked that happened? And how has Kenny responded? I know he's continuing rehab. He seems to be doing well, but and this is one of those questions I don't want to ask.
I was really.
I think we just lost Jill Campbell right there. Hopefully she'll be back, but it's a Kenny Anderson story. You can find that on Amazon Prime. And Mr. Chibbs. Mr. Chibbs is the name. And let's see if we can add Jill back right now. Jill.
Sorry.
Oh, that's all right.
Why I love you. I was very upset when I heard about the stroke. I think it was a big wake-up call for Kenny. Kenny's a big partier, and he likes to eat his steaks, and he likes to drink his wine, and I think he wasn't taking his medication. So, and I know Natasha was like having a struggle with that. And this guy is like, he's rock solid, great shape, right? Like playing around on the basketball court with him. Like sometimes, like he's a brick, like, no. And thank God he is, because that really saved his life. And as he probably told you the story, like his daughter saved his life, and his dog saved his life. And, his dog, he was having, felt an eye twitch, felt the symptoms. The dog was flipping out, got the daughter came out of the room and like, had learned in school about what stroke symptoms were, and like, so I think it was a big wake up call, and I've seen him since then, and he's awesome. Like, he's in such a good place. He's so healthy, so happy. He's teaching. He's coaching. He's in, things happen for a reason, but he got lucky, and it's because he was in like he's that athlete body, you know.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Hey, so I wanted to ask you about his relationships, and Tasha seems to be phenomenal, incredible. They've certainly had their issues, but could you just speak about Kenny's current wife and how strong of a person she is? Did you want to highlight her more? Was she distant to the whole documentary, or what is your relationship with Natasha?
She was awesome. It's funny because now we've grown closer, like, you know, since the documentary, we're all
Yeah.
pretty tight. Like, you know, in the beginning, I think she also, you know, they were nervous. Like she had a big job in a hospital as an administrator,
Yeah.
you know, and she's becoming, you know, it's a very public film. So I think she was tentative, but then she also was super open and super great about like she'd be like, the story needs to be told. The story needs to be told, you know, and then like, you know, when she sat down for that interview with me,
Yeah.
where she was just so open about Kenny's infidelity and crying. I have a bunch of that. And it's hard. And I maybe wish I added more of that because I do have a lot of that in outtakes. Part of me feels like one day I'm going to do the director's cut and go back and like so much I have that I would love to like edit together and just put on the web as a way, you know, to get people interested in watching the film. But she was pretty open, don't you think?
Oh, she was great. I thought the honesty really came through, and it lent itself to understand Kenny better, but just tell the whole story. My question too with that is what you just mentioned. I got to interview Jack McCallum, and he wrote the Dream Team book, and he was around the original Dream Team. But when does a book come out from this documentary using a lot of the footage or the stories that did not make the documentary?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would rather do like a director's cut, like, but people have wanted to do a book on him as well. So I think he's always wanted to do a book. But we have to get with our executive producer who like owns the film and like, but yeah, we would love that. Like, I think the story, like when he had the stroke, I was ready to go down and like shoot part 2. Like, and I find him endlessly interesting. His life is like, you know, and you know, there's so much to say because like players today are not losing all their money. They're getting so much better educated and again, like they have the internet, the NBA helps them. They're smart, savvy businessmen, you know, and that wasn't around for players like Kenny back in the day. You know, I mean, I think he would have he would have been so much more benefited from coming, you know.
The education they've learned from their past. And I think being famous, being wealthy at a young age, having opportunity. His first relationship was with someone from Salt and Pepper. Is that right?
Yeah.
Can you, man, I just look back and I'm 45 now, but if I'm like early 20s, I make it to the NBA with a ton of money, hanging around celebrities. It's kind of like you're going to have these things that you are just immature and do not know how to handle. Just say you right out of Ithaca, you were making millions of dollars with opportunity to meet and greet whoever you wanted. How would you have responded?
I agree. And like, yeah, I probably would have responded the same way. Like party, spend it, have fun. And like, it's so interesting because doing the doc with Kenny, when I first got into that world, like to that day, he still had like hangers honors. Like I would get these weird texts, emails, people that like wanted to have part of the documentary or wanted a part of Kenny. And like, you know, of course I'm friendly to everyone. I'm researching and I'm, you know, trying to figure out who people are and if they're part of the story or if they can bring funding to the table. And like, it's wild. Like the amount of people still, like he's still very famous. And I always thought about that. I'm like, if he's getting all this, I can't even imagine like, you know, with a LeBron, what happens to LeBron or like, you know, you could see why people are standoffish or like, you know, they have their people around and they're like, who are, you know, are you real? Are you, because everyone wants a piece of them, everyone. And for Kenny, like, he was so young and everyone wanted a piece of him. And, you know, he had some people that were really there for him and led him the right way. Like, you know, his coaches were amazing. You know, from high school to Georgia Tech to, you know, and those, they really helped him. But then there are these people who really, you know, he was a partier. He was a playboy.
So I have a question as far as Derek Coleman. I loved watching Derek Coleman when he was at Syracuse. I remember it was a Rising Stars NBA video with him and Kenny Anderson way back when, and Kenny said he was the best player he ever played with, good friend back in the day. Did you reach out to other NBA players or teammates, or did you want to keep it strictly about Kenny? I did love the part with Bobby Hurley. I thought that was fascinating how their relationship continues. But Derek Coleman specifically, was there any thought of reaching out to DC?
I think we did reach out to DC, and you know, but then when we figured out the story, he was willing to talk to us. And then we have like an outtakes. We had like Kenny did this crazy thing called the NBA penis monologues, and Anthony Mason was in it. And I mean, that's another one I just want to edit and put online because it's hysterical. They're all talking. They're talking about like talking about their sex lives. It's crazy. But it's funny, so I should put it on. And actually, Real Sports shot it too when we were shooting it, and it never made it onto the air. That's how crazy it was. But yeah. So but then, and we have Kenny Smith in it. But when we
and again, this is Jill Campbell. You can find more information at seagullinc.com, seagullinc.com. I think we just lost her again, but she's the one that put on Mr. Chibbs in Amazon Prime, the Kenny Anderson story, the documentary. I certainly encourage you to go check that out, buy that, purchase it, watch that. And Jill, welcome back in. It's good to have you.
So it's all right. Oh my God. So I was saying we had Kenny Smith in the film, who was awesome. And so when we decided what story do we want to tell, and we were talking about like, this is his, he's going through a midlife crisis. He's trying to find his way back to getting a coaching job and being a good father, being a real husband to, you know, his third wife. You really have to streamline your plot. So like if you're, I mean, and also, so Derek Coleman would have been great as like another person to talk about playing with him, and it would have been good. I mean, a lot of stuff too was like budget, really.
Right.
So it was like, you know, each shoot you have to pay to go visit them, and you fly and whatever. So when we figured out what this plot was, we just streamlined it like into that type of story. So it was like Bobby Hurley, Kenny Smith, you know, the people that were really, you know.
Well, Kenny Smith said made an interesting comment, and he told Kenny Anderson that you just have to stop dipping your toe in the water, and you just need to jump in, find what you want to do, and jump in. I thought that was very pertinent. I thought that was very good, and seeing Kenny now coaching at Fisk is a great point. Did you find that hanging around Kenny Anderson that he wasn't all in? He was just trying to figure out the next steps for him?
Yeah, that was kind of the frustrating part of making the film, because it was like he wasn't all in. And I think when he made the film, I wasn't sure if he really did want a coaching job. Like part of him really liked hanging out and going to like camps and, you know, making special appearances at the Nets and getting flown here and there, and like not doing the 9 to 5, but but then like when he got Fisk, he really loved it, and he really did love it. I was hoping that would have happened while I was filming, you know, like I was waiting for that ending, and it never happened. So you have to look at what's going on. So like I captured what you picked up on, like what Kenny Smith said, he was putting his toe in the water. He thought he wanted to do it. He would say he wasn't sure if he wanted to do it. And it was super hard to get those gigs, and he had a reputation in the NBA. Like,
sure.
So Fisk is a godsend, and he's, you know, he called me the other day from the office. He's there. He's like working. He loves it.
Yeah. Hey, Jill, I have a question that maybe I should ask you off air, but like a documentary, I want to get it on a camera. With Amazon Prime, how does that work for you? Is that something where, not royalties, but do you get something being on a platform like Amazon Prime? How did that benefit you? How did that opportunity even come to you to be on Amazon?
So, we had an amazing festival run. We premiered at Doc NYC, which is a very, very prestigious festival. And then we played, I think, about 10 or 15 festivals around the country. And that kind of like raises your profile and gets people to know about the film. And then we also had a great PR agency, Frank PR. And then we got a sales agent. Brahmarama picked up the film, a distributor, and Cargo Films was our sales agent, and they're the ones who like try to sell the film.
Yeah.
So Amazon and Canopy, you get every time somebody watches it, you don't get a lot, but you get our
sure.
And then we were on Urban Movie Channel for the first 3 years, and they also gave us a flat fee. So that's how it works. Like they give you a flat fee. So then like our contract with Urban Movie Channel just is up, and now we're like free agents again. So we've had some interest. We've had some people, I think even the Michael Jordan doc has like we're getting a lot of hits on Amazon right now. So I'm wondering if people are just like really into basketball docs right now, which is awesome. Thank you very much. The Last Dance, which is awesome. I loved. So yeah, we've gotten some people reaching out again, and we're hoping to like get another sales, but like stay on Amazon, and and we could have been on iTunes as well. It's kind of like the same, like if someone's going to go to Amazon, they're going to go to iTunes. So
right. Hey, so a couple questions for you. Of course, the basketball aspect is what I enjoyed most, but you've been a part of other projects. What makes a good documentary for you? What really resonates with you as you're looking for a story, as you're writing, as you're producing?
I mean, that's a great question. And I mean, Kenny's story was amazing. Like that was gold because he's well known. His story, he's rags to riches. His story was like dramatic, and he really opened up to me and crying on camera and was so open. And so I think that like, I just worked on a film that's going to come out in the fall called Seat 20D. And it's a mother who lost her child in the bombing of Pan Am Flight 103 over Lockerbie, Scotland in 1988. And so that was like one of the first terrorist attacks on United States citizens. And these people, Libyans, put a bomb on the plane, killed everyone on the plane. And 35 Syracuse University students lost their life they were coming home from a semester abroad. So this mother is an artist, and she, we were in Montauk, New York, and she creates, in order to get over her grief, she started sculpting herself and how she felt when she heard the news of her son's death. Like she used her art to get over her grief. And like we happened upon the sculpture garden in the backyard of her Montauk house. She opens the garden from 10 to 12. And basically what happened is when she started doing this, a lot of the other mothers volunteered to model for her. And they also got something out of this. And so in the backyard of her house, she's got a sculpture garden of over 75 women in mourning, life-sized. It's a memorial. It's a garden. It's a study on grief and how a mother gets over grief. So, I mean, that again really spoke to me because it's like it's a story about life, and it's also can teach other people, like people watching this, these poor mothers who've lost children, can watch this film and they could see how this mother got through it and see that this mother 30 years on can smile, that she can live life, that she can get through this. And I feel like that's a really important story to share,
I definitely agree. That's phenomenal. It's fascinating. I was just thinking, like with coaching, you never look, high school coaches, middle school coaches, you never say like what you get paid per hour just because there's so much time. When you put together all of this and the hours and the time that you invest, I imagine that partially you enjoy the paycheck, but you do not count it as far as how much you get paid to accomplish such a task. Could you just talk about how you found to balance making a living with really telling people stories that make our stories so much better?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And like, it is hard. Like I was originally a playwright, and I had some plays produced on off Broadway, and I wanted to write for television. And then I happened upon documentary. I got hired for my first one in 2006 as an associate producer, Dancing Across Borders. It's also on Amazon. It's a great film. And I worked for that company for like 6 years, and I learned kind of like I got paid to learn the business. It was an awesome opportunity. I ran the company for the director. I just learned on the job. And then after that, because she just made that one film, didn't make another one. So after that experience, like people started contacting me to work on their films, and I was getting paid. I mean, it's not great pay, but it's okay. Each job pays differently. It really depends who you're working for. And so I started realize, and I was still trying to be a playwright. And then I was like, I'm making no money in theater, nothing. But I'm actually making a living in documentary, which is weird. And I'm like, and I really like it. And I'm using my theater skills and my story skills. And I was like, I should just go for documentary. What am I doing? So I just decided to go all in and become a documentarian. And I went to grad school, got my master's in it. And now I am an adjunct professor at Purchase. So like that really helps. But like it's a freelance gig. I mean, like you could do a full, like some people will do a full time, like get hired at CNN or get hired like for a network and be like on staff, which great. They're super competitive. I've tried to get those jobs. I've never been able to, but I get a lot of freelance jobs. Like I just worked on, I was a field producer on this film on Doc Severinsen. Do you know who he is?
I've heard the name. Yeah.
Yeah. He was the trumpeter for Johnny Carson.
Oh, okay. Sure.
He was the Questlove of his day for Johnny Carson. He was like his, his head music band leader. And so there's a documentary coming out on that, and that's directed by Kevin Bright, who was one of the co-creators of Friends, and Jeff Consiglio is also a really well-known editor and director. And so they hired me freelance, and I worked on that with them for a couple of years. And so it's like you get your gigs where you can, and then you do your films, and it's not, unless you're, unless you like have the Sundance hit, it's not like a big money maker, but that's not why you're doing it.
Hey, Jill, a couple quick questions, and we'll get you out. Jill Campbell, thank you again for making the time to be a part and tell your story, not just Kenny's story as well.
Yeah, that's great questions.
So on Friends, there was an episode where the gynecologist, I believe, they said he didn't want to have sex with, I forget which character it was, but he said, like, when I do this all day, I don't want to go home and have a relationship and all of that. For you, do you find yourself watching documentaries, or do you find yourself not watching much TV?
I am obsessed with documentary. And I'm also like, I've been a screener for film festivals. I've also helped like some award shows screen there, like been a judge on like, I'm not allowed to name what they are, but awards. And I also run the Producers Guild documentary salon series.
Wow.
So sometimes I'm watching way too many documentaries. Like there was a time like a couple of months ago where it was like, oh my God, like I had a doc a night or 2 docs a night that I had to go through. Or when you're a screener for a film festival, it's like you're watching a lot of films, but at the same time, you learn so much. Like I tell people who want to learn their craft, like any young person who wants to get into it, become a screener for a film festival. Like learn what people are doing right, what they're doing wrong, what makes a good film. Like, and it's also really cool to see what's out there. What are people filming? What are the stories that are interesting people? How do they go about it?
That's really good. 2 questions. The second is a 2-part question, but the first question is simply, If you were to play in a fictional movie, would you want to play the hero or the villain?
Ooh, that's a good question. Oh, definitely the hero.
Okay. I always say the villain because full time I'm a pastor, and I think that's my alter ego is playing the villain. The second is if or when the feature film is made about your life. I stole this from Hernando Plano Speak Contagious podcast. Who plays you in that feature film about your life?
Oh my God, that's an awesome question. And something I've not thought about.
So while you think, I always say The Rock, Dwayne Johnson. Not that we look anything alike, but I think, hey, if he's going to play me, then who better than Dwayne Johnson?
Absolutely, 100%. I don't know. I'm thinking like Sharon Stone.
There you go. And then
Sharon Stone.
the second part to that question is, who plays your love interest in that feature film about your life?
Oh my God, definitely Brad Pitt.
Oh, okay. There you go. I always go with Halle Berry, which doesn't make my wife mad anymore. She just shakes her head at me. But Dwayne Johnson and Halle Berry, that'd be a movie worth watching.
Too. I'd also go with like a young Jack Nicholson. I'm a huge fan of Jack Nicholson. So like, yeah, young Jack. He's totally into basketball. You know, miss him on the sidelines.
Jill, thank you so much for making the time. You're the best. I want to encourage everybody to purchase and watch Mr. Chibbs on Amazon Prime. Check out seagullinc.com. And Jill is on Instagram, Twitter. You can find her all over. So we just want to say thank you, Jill, for making the time and sharing your story with us today. So thanks so much.
Thank you. These were great questions. I really appreciate it. So
all right, Jill. Thank you. And again, that's Jill Campbell. You are listening to J Fuller Interviews on YouTube, the Facebook group, Instagram, and Twitter. Make sure you come check us out. Subscribe on YouTube, J Fuller Interviews. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you again soon. And tell your story and share other people's stories so we can become better people listening and learning from one another. All right, we'll talk to you soon.